Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. I'm Scott. I have finished Five Year Battle Stephen King, and I want to do further Stephen King content. At some point, I am going to be ranking all the books by Stephen King, but that's to me a huge undertaking. So before I do that, I want to try something a little less difficult. So I decided I'm going to rank all the Stephen King novellas. Now, the problem with that is that you have to ask, what's a novella? And nobody knows 100%. King touches upon this himself in the afterword of different seasons. Roughly speaking, kind of what I'm going for is a novella is something that's between 17,500 words and 40 to 50,000 words. Or kind of what I look at, if it's approaching 50 pages, time to consider a novella. If it hits 200 pages, it's no longer a novella. Again, the rules aren't hard and fast. So I went to the Stephen King website and looked for the novellas, and it says there are 24. But it doesn't even have the novellas that in Full Dark, No Stars, and it doesn't include some things that I know are novellas. So I went to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a little bit better at saying what's novella. I will say in this list, there are some stories that I felt could have been short stories, but they were so close that I decided I'm going to go ahead and keep them in as a novella. So there are 41 novellas to go through. So I have as number 41 is A Face in the Crowd, written with Stuart Onan. Stuart Onan, you might remember, wrote Faithful with Stephen King, which was basically a documentation of the year the Boston Red Sox won the World Series after a long drought, the curse of the Bambino, everything like that. Uh, a Face in the Crowd is a story idea that King had thought of, but he couldn't come up with the ending. And Stuart Onan heard about it and he worked on the ending. I don't know exactly what the writing process was afterward, but basically about a man who is watching a baseball game on TV and he sees somebody in the crowd on the TV that he knows to be dead. And it goes from there. I gotta say, King is pretty hit and miss with baseball stories. This isn't necessarily a story about baseball, but stories that have baseball as the background. He has probably a good half a dozen that I could point to. This one I think is on the miss one. The characters just don't do it for me, and it's not an original story by any stretch of the imagination, and it's not even a good retelling of a familiar tale. So that is number 41. At number 40 is another baseball story, Blockade Billy, published by itself, and it's also available. Yeah, I don't remember. It is available in another collection. Uh, Blockade Billy is basically about a catcher who joins a new team, and the catcher is strange, but he's very good, and it's just that it's a little character sketch about this catcher and touching upon these teams. It's just it probably would have worked better for me as a short story. It definitely works better as part of a collection. When it's just on its own, it doesn't hold up well. I will say that I have started the process of ranking all the Stephen King books. This is definitely in the lower half of the collection. Number 40 is Blind Willie from the book Hearts in Atlantis. Hearts in Atlantis is about the Vietnam era, mostly, although in some ways it's not, especially in the first novella that we will get to later. It is a collection of four novellas, one short story. Blind Willie is the center story, and by center I mean the one in the middle. There are five, it's number three. It's about a character who we meet in the first novella, Low Men in Yellow Coats. He is a Vietnam veteran. He lives in a nice house, but he goes to the city, dresses as a beggar, and gets money that way. A lot of the reason why this one is down so low is just because the character Willie is not interesting at all. I hate to use that word again, but that's where I'm going. I think it would have been better if it had been an entirely different character. Uh, I don't know who else it could have been if we gotta go to the first novella for it, but just Willie doesn't work for me. Number 38 is The Sundog from Four Past Midnight. Sundog is the last novella in this book. Definitely the worst. It honestly, its biggest error is that it's just not memorable. A boy gets a Polaroid camera for his birthday, starts taking pictures. The pictures show a dog, and each new picture shows the dog getting closer and closer. We also get to meet Pop Merrill, who is, I believe, the father of Ace Merrill from The Body, and it's set in Castle Rock, but honestly, it just doesn't do anything for me. And the ending is the ending is the type of ending that gets King the reputation for his endings, although I don't necessarily agree with that reputation. Stories like this keep it alive. Number 37 is N in The Bizarre Bad Dreams, which is also where Blockade Billy is, now that I see it. N is kind of there's a term for it, but I will just call it a onion story where there are layers. There's a story within a story within a story. It's one of those ones where what caused this? We don't know. It's a mystery, but this is what the mystery affects. A person kills themselves after having gone to a therapist, and the therapist kills themselves, and it's a good exercise novella, but as a read, it just doesn't do anything for me. Number 36 is Rat in If It Bleeds. This is the story of a writer who basically makes a deal with a rat. It's a kind of a deal with the devil thing that he has touched upon in Needful Things and other works. A couple more which will come up in this video, and I think he's pretty much covered the topic pretty well. And I don't think that we needed another novella about it, and I just don't think that it contributes. Number 35 is Fair Extension, which is another one of those kind of deal with the devil type of tales. I'll be quite honest, I almost don't want to include this one. This is probably the shortest novella in the collection, or in the novellas that I'm going over. There are just both the Stephen King website and Wikipedia refer to it as a novella. But it is kind of a deal with the devil thing, and the ending to me is it makes sense. It's cheap, I think. or it just doesn't work. So that's why it's down so low. I will be quite honest. Every other novella in this collection is amazing. So, or pretty close to great. Let's not go too amazing. So this one kind of really stands out as a disappointment. All right, another one from the Bizarre Bad Dreams is Morality, which is basically can't remember the name of the movie, but Robert Redford offers Woody Harrelson and Demi Moore money for him to be able to sleep with Demi Moore. It's kind of like that. Honestly, I probably would have preferred to read a philosophy article about morality rather than this story. Uh, it's not bad, but I just don't think it contributes much of anything new. Number 35, also from the Bizarre Bad Dreams, is is it pronounced Yer or It's about a guy who gets a magic Kindle. Stephen King didn't write this as an advertisement, basically. He was approached about doing something, but then said he didn't want to do it, but then the idea stuck in his head. But it's kind of that's in the background. So I always enjoy King writing about books, and this definitely touches upon them. So that's good, but I don't really think there's much else to this novella. That was book number 33. So I may have misnumbered some of them. Book number 32, or novella number 32, is Cycle of the Werewolf. I will be quite honest. I think this is one of those few occasions, not something I often say. I think the movie is better. I know that there was a book with the screenplay in it, also with the novella, I believe, published, I think, in 1985. I think I either read it or I had it at one point. I remember liking the screenplay better than this. This was originally written as it was going to be used as a calendar, but obviously it changed. It's King's approach to the werewolf story. I think the villain is not particularly effective. Not the werewolf itself, but who the werewolf is. I do like the hero of the story, the young boy. I I think I like the movie better. And if I like the movie better, that's a pretty good sign that maybe the novella didn't go the way you might have wanted it to. Number 31 is The Little Sisters of Eloria, which is in Everything's Eventual. It is a Dark Tower story. It really happens before the beginning of the Dark Tower. It's also a vampire story. It's a fine little story, but I think it shows that Roland doesn't work unless he has companions. I think we get shown that in The Gunslinger, and we get showed here in the fact that Roland's tale improves so much when we get to the drawing of the three and he gets companions. Roland works fine if he has somebody else with him. Number 30 is Mile 81 from the Bizarre Bad Dreams. Bizarre Bad Dreams is just not doing well in this countdown. Mile 81, it's an interesting story. It's weird, it's strange, it's almost like several different vignettes of things that happen at this Mile 81. One of the stories that I think would probably work better if it was longer. But it's fine. I think we're getting into the area stories where they're decent to good. Now we've gone past the bad ones and we're in the decent to good area. Number 29, which is not in a Stephen King book. It is actually in Full Throttle by Joe Hill. It is In the Tall Grass, written with Joe Hill, about twins who get lost in the tall grass. And it was a good read the first time I read it. I don't think it holds up very well in subsequent reads. I think it's definitely, I was almost about to say it's a little bit darker than what we might be used to from King, but that's not true. I think King sometimes just lulls me in to think that he doesn't do dark stuff, but he does. He tricks us, I think. So, um, the there is another novella that King wrote with Joe that is higher up. I think a much better story. I look forward to him writing a novel with Joe Hill. He's written one with Owen, so let's see if he can write one with Joe. Number 28 is Dolan's Cadillac from Nightmares in Dreamscapes. Dolan's Cadillac is a revenge tale. It's a pretty straightforward revenge tale. I like the narrator, who is the person seeking revenge. Uh, but again, it is pretty straightforward. It's a likable story, and that's really all there is to say about it. I think you'll enjoy it too. Number 27 is Secret Window, Secret Garden in 4 Past Midnight. This is a good to very good novella with a main character that I simply dislike greatly. I think if I had been able to empathize with the main character more, I would rank this higher, but I just was unable to, and that's why it's ranked where it's at. Basically, a writer encounters somebody who says that the writer has stolen writing from him and used it as his own. And it goes from there. Twist ending, not really. I think you can kind of see it coming, but it's decent, but I just do not like the main character. Number 26, Why We're in Vietnam from Hearts and Atlantis. It is the fourth novella in the book. It involves another character from the first novella, Low Men in Yellow Coats. He was a boy there. He's an adult now. I think, well, I like him much more than I liked Willie. I think him being such a secondary character in the first novella, and then us going two novellas without encountering him, and then in the way we encounter him here, I think it loses its impact. It's decent. I like John Sully, the character. It's just, especially as part of this book, this I think it's like the fourth best in this book, only beating out Blind Willie. Heavenly Shades of Night Are Falling is better than it too, but because it's so short, I did not include it in this ranking. Number 25 is 1922 from Full Dark, No Stars. It is set in the early 20th century. A man convinces his son to help him kill his wife for money reasons, and then he pays for it. That's the short term version. I would say possibly like a retelling or reimagining and somewhat modernizing uh, the Telltale Heart in a way. Pretty good. Number 24 is Mr. Harrigan's Phone from If It Bleeds. If I make sure I got that, yes. Stop me if you've heard this one before. A young man encounters an old man and they form an unlikely friendship. It's a Stephen King story. It's a decent story. It's a pretty good story. I honestly, I really like most of the novella. I do think that I would be fine if King just stayed away from making technology a huge component of his stories. And that would work out fine for me. I think that brought this down here. I think that contributes to sell a little bit, which I found out while doing research for other people's top lists. Cell is actually a favorite of some people. Interesting. At number 23 is If It Bleeds from If It Bleeds. It is a Holly Gibney story, so your enjoyment of this is going to largely depend on your enjoyment of Holly Gibney. Holly Gibney is a very polarizing character for King readers. I am fine with Holly. I do think that she works better as a secondary character rather than perhaps the main character. But If It Bleeds is so far the only time I've seen her as a main character, and it was fine. I don't think the tale itself was that great, but it was interesting. I am currently reading Holly, so we will see if I confirm my theory about her as the main character or if I must take it back. Number 22, probably a novella you did not expect to see on here because you don't necessarily think of it as a novella, but it was published as a novella in Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine, as were three other tales from this book. It is The Slow Mutants. There are basically five parts of this book. The last part, the Gunslinger and the Dark Man, was too short for me to include it as a novella. But The Slow Mutants is part four. It is a very big part of the Dark Tower overall story, so I won't get into it. Um, but it's mainly all one scene is the important part. The rest of it is just getting us to it, and it's just we know it's coming. We're waiting for it to come, and then it comes, and it's a very good piece of writing. But it's just waiting for what we know is happening, which is why it's the lowest ranked of the novellas from the Gunslinger. Number 21 is The Oracle in the Mountain from the Gunslinger. It's our first experience with the Oracle, probably a better experience that we will have than future experiences with Oracle. The main reason I ranked it above the Slow Mutants is there's just not that waiting for what we know is happening. At number 20 is Throttle, written with Joe King, written with Joe Hill, who is Joe King, in Full Throttle. Uh, about a motorcycle gang and them having to pay for the actions of one of their members. It's not an original tale, but it's still an interesting read. I like the characters, and again, I just wish that they would write a novel together. Number 19 is Elevation. Basically, King's retelling of the Incredible Shrinking Man in a way that our main character shrinks a different way in this one. Honestly, I rank this one this highly because the characters are just very likable. The story itself doesn't necessarily stand out more than any of the other novellas, but I just like the characters. That's why it's up high. I accidentally kicked the phone, so that's why we're in a different direction. Number 18 is Riding the Bullet from Everything's Eventual. Um, about a kid who gets a ride as he's going to visit his sick mother, and He talks to the driver and what happens from that talk. Uh, I think it's kind of a story that King tells in many different stories in various ways. I just think this one is a little bit more successful than others. Uh, I think he writes in the forward to it, it's just another one of his stories, like The Woman in the Room, in which he kind of looks at his own mother's death. And I think it's probably one of the most successful ones. I think also Roadwork was one, and Roadwork did not work for me at all. So, but this one was a very good one. Number 17 is The Way Station from The Gunslinger. This is where we first meet Jake and kind of get a little bit of Jake's background. We also encounter Cuthbert from Roland's past. And this is probably the most pure storytelling in the book. And again, as I said before, shows how well Roland is with others, or shows how much Roland needs others, both the person and the character to work within the narrative. Number 16 is The Langoliers and Four Past Midnight. The Langoliers is a ridiculous novella. It's just over the top, and Craig Toomey I dislike greatly, but somehow it just works for me. Uh, don't 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 watch the mini series of it. Although Brent's uh, Bronson Pinchot in it is good as Greg Toomey, I just and also David Morse is also good in it. I just think that the mini series you shouldn't have made something that needs special effects into a mini series in what the 1990s on ABC. A bunch of people wake up on a plane to find out everybody else is gone. Just people who were sleeping are there. And they want to get back to where they were because obviously they're not in the same plane as these other people. So it's how they do it. Again, it's wonky, it's over the top. It's still a fun read. Number 15 from Everything's Eventual, it's Everything's Eventual. I'll be honest, the reason this one ranks up so high, I like the main character Dinky. Sometime that's just is going to be what gets me going, especially with King. King may have a plot that takes forever to get to, and he may sometimes have an ending that doesn't work. Uh, but most of the time, he will get me interested in the character, and I really like Dinky. And Dinky, will probably be seen again later. Not in this list, but in other King works. Number 14 is Gwendy's Button Box, written with Richard Chismar. Uh, about a young girl named Gwendy who gets a button box from a mysterious man who may or may not be a familiar character, but perhaps not as malevolent a character as we might expect him to be. The button box can do things, and I will leave it there. It's a quick, fun read. It this has sequels. The second book, which I cannot recall the name of right now, is written only by Richard Chismar. But the third book, Gwendy's Final Task, is written by King and Chismar again. It is not great. If you're going to read a Gwendy's book, yeah, read this one. The other two aren't bad, but quality and sensibility go down as you go. Number 13 is Apt Pupil from Different Seasons. Apt Pupil is an excellently written story that I just do not care for. It's just one of those stories. I read it. It was a great read, written well, the characters work. Do not want to read it again. The quality of it is mainly why it's here. Me not wanting to read it again is why it's not in the top 10. Stop looking at me, Wash. So, at people. Go away, dude. Number 12 is Low Men in Yellow Coats from Hearts in Atlantis. It is kind of stands out a little bit different. It's mainly introducing us to characters that we will see throughout the book. But unlike the rest of the stories in here, it doesn't directly have anything to do with Vietnam or the Vietnam protests. It's set in the 50s, and it's about a young man named Bobby who meets an older man and they form a strange friendship. A little bit science fiction based. Also, and I will not get too much more into it so I don't ruin anything for anybody, ties to the Dark Tower. It's just a great novella. I just don't think that it necessarily works as well in the collection. It except that it does set things up, but then you get a tone shift after. Perhaps if I was able to fully separate it from the collection, it might be a little bit higher. Number 11 is A Very Tight Place from Just After Sunset. I'll be quite honest, I debated whether or not to include this one. I think it maybe runs a little short for a novella, and that's also one of the reasons that it did not rank higher. But both Stephen King website and Wikipedia say that it's a novella. I did not count the words and I could not find anything that told me the exact number of words, so I'm going to go, okay, it's a novella. Uh, Basically about well, it's a gross story. A, a neighbor traps the main character in a porta potty. They are fighting for a multitude of reasons. Will the main character get out? And if he does get out, what will he do? I think perhaps what stands out for me also is that the main character is a gay man, but I don't think that King makes that his character. Tell me about him. Oh, he's gay. And no, he's just this man who happens to be gay. And that's progress for King, I would say. So, but it's a very fun story. But yeah, if you get easily grossed out, probably don't read it. Number 10 is The Gunslinger. And do you want to know why this is the top ranked Dark Tower novella? Because of one sentence. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. There are interesting and things that probably 2023 Stephen King would not write in here, but it's our introduction to Roland Deschain of Gilead, and it's a pretty good introduction. Probably one of King's best opening lines. Probably one of the best opening lines for any book. So yeah, cause a wheel. Number 9 from Full Dark No Stars is A Good Marriage. A woman discovers that her husband is not who she thinks he is. Stephen King. Well, okay, let me take a little quick detour. Uh, we had a book club in my family. We do. I was one who presented the last book, which was Horns by Joe Hill, and my cousin said basically that she thinks Joe Hill hates women like his father does, which I don't think is fair, but you can have evidence to show maybe like early King does not do women well. I think he improves in like books like Dolores Claiborne and in later books, Lisi's story, uh, show him writing women better. This is probably another one that I would add to this. If in I don't care that she said that King hates women, but if I wanted to disprove that, I could show her this. I'd probably show her Dolores Claiborne first, but this is a pretty good one. Just I think nowadays, and I don't think that this is something that King would have been able to do during his early writing career, is he is able to show his female characters finding and using their strength in a believable way. And I just don't think he would have been able to do that in 1976. Number 8 from my worst looking book, Skeleton Crew, is The Mist. And some people would probably be a little bit surprised that it is this slow. It's a well liked novella. I just over time, I've seen flaws in it. Some of the characters are almost caricatures or stereotypes, uh, one dimensional characters. I do like the main character. Like King, I don't really get the main character getting with another woman so soon. Didn't make sense to me. I will say, without spoiling too much, that the ending of the novella is a little bit open ended, which that can work, but sometimes it's just like, no, give us an ending. The book or the movie does give an ending. I don't like the movie ending, though. I haven't watched the full movie. But it is a good kind of closed room horror book. Number 7 is Hearts in Atlantis from Hearts in Atlantis. It's about a bunch of college guys playing hearts. And that's the main gist of it. It is set in the 1960s when Vietnam protests were uh, very active on college campuses. As you can see, if you read Hearts in Suspension, which is available from the University of Maine, a lot of what happens in here is actually taken from King's time at the University of Maine. It's one of those times where I think when King writes about what he knows, he does just a tremendously good job on it. I read this recently because I just got the Hearts in Suspension, and I was going to just not read that part because I've read it before, but I just started going through it, and all of a sudden I've read the entire thing. Just a great novella, and I think if anything, if you want to go through here for Vietnam, this that is the best choice. Obviously, at least King's experience because he did not go to Vietnam itself, but as a college student during the Vietnam era. Number 6 from Skeleton Crew is The Ballad of the Flexible Bullet, which I'm going to assume is probably not on a lot of people's top 10 lists for novellas. It's about writers and editors, and it's about obsession. Uh, and there are jokes about how King writes about writers so much. although I don't think he does it as much as people say he does. But when you do write what you know, and you're as skilled as King is, you can do it pretty well. This was also written in the 80s, I believe, or at least it was published in the 80s. And this is also in the time that King was going through his own addiction. So, uh, probably speaking on some of the mental aspects of the writer in here, probably has some pretty good experience with that. Just, I love this story. I understand not everybody is going to, but I really do. Number 5 from If It Bleeds is The Life of Chuck. The Life of Chuck is a fucked up novella. It's strange. It just whenever people say the king doesn't have any new ideas, that he's just basically writing the same thing all the time, I I, I have to say go read The Life of Chuck. It's just he has tried before to write outside his comfort zone. I don't think that he has ever successfully done it as well as he does in The Life of Chuck. I don't even really want to tell you what it is about. You just need to experience it. Don't If you have not read it, don't look it up. Just read it. That's my advice. Number 4 from 4 Past Midnight is The Library Policeman. Probably another novella that other people are not going to have this high up on their list. Honestly, a lot of it just has to do with the main characters, Sam and Naomi. Probably, I think, would hit home for anybody who spent a lot of time in a library as a kid. Uh, is trigger warning material, probably more so than any other novella. If I would give you a trigger warning for anything else, probably the Gunslinger novella. Probably for some of the other ones, but those are the only two that pop up to mind right now. But uh, I just really love this one, and I'm scared of the library policeman. So that is number 4. Now, if you've been keeping track, and why wouldn't you be? You will probably notice the 3 remaining novellas might be familiar. Probably not in the order that you might think they are. At number 3 is Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption from different seasons. If you've seen The Shawshank Redemption, which probably more people have seen the movie than read the novella, uh, you know what it's about. I will say the movie is great. I still think the book is better. I've seen people say that the movie is better and that the novella is mediocre. I won't. That is wrong. It's a great story. I think it also dives into some of the things that the movie avoids. What did Red do? What was Red's crime in the movie? I mean, maybe if you pause it when you're looking at his parole board paperwork, you might know, but it doesn't touch upon it. And of course, that's because the movie makers want you to be on Red's side. And maybe if you knew what he did, you won't. That's not the case with the novella. I just think the novella works much better. And the movie is great. So, uh, number 2, and I will let you know, I had this at number 1 at some point, and I will tell you why it's not number 1. Number 2 is The Body from different seasons. Also made into a movie, Stand By Me. Stand By Me was a good movie, nowhere near as good as the novella. The novella is awesome. Why didn't I make this number one? Ah, well, one, I think the number one novella is better, and when I tell you what it is, you're gonna say no, it's not. But hey, my opinion. But two, King included Stud City in it, and there was no reason to. If I every time I read this novella, and I've read it many times, if every time I read it, I skip a huge portion of the novella, there's something wrong with the novella. The Stud City, he includes two stories in here: Stud City and the Revenge of Lard Ass Hogan, which you know of if you've seen the movie. The Revenge of Lard Ass Hogan, is it needed? No, but it's hilarious. Stud City, is it needed? No. There's nothing that you get from Stud City, which is not a good story, in the author King through Gordy LaChance acknowledges that it's not a good story. There's nothing you get from that story that you don't get from the novella. Otherwise, this is some of the best writing that King has. Uh, there are passages in here, particularly after they encounter Ray Brower, that I read more than most passages. Those who have watched me before know that the last chapter, Insomnia, is the one I've read the most. But that's and again, I had it at number one for a little bit. And there, one, it's a great book, or it's a great novella. Two, I kind of felt like people weren't going to agree what I wanted to put with it number one. But then I've seen other people's lists, and it's like, you know what? This is no worse than what else is out there. So number one from different seasons is the breathing method. The breathing method, unlike the other three novellas in here, never had a movie made about it, unless it was one of his dollar babies, which I'm not sure of. It's not as well known. It's not as well liked. The other three novellas, some of them or all of them appear in a lot of people's top 10 novellas. The breathing method really doesn't. But I like the narrator. I like the club. I'm upset that we only got the club in one other story and it was not a good story. I like the tale. I like the doctor and the character. I believe her name was Susan. Yeah, I knew her last name was Stansfield, but he usually refers to her as Miss Stanfield. But I believe it's Susan. I like both those characters. I like the the culmination of the story, or the story that he tells. It's another one of King's like tales within a tale story, because Dr. McCarran tells this story about Susan on I believe it's Christmas Eve. Yes. And on that night, the people at the club usually tell dark stories. So it's tale of the narrator, David, can't remember his last name. I don't know if it's mentioned. Uh, he talks about his introduction to the club and then listening to McCarran tell about this tale, and then it wraps around with the narrator again. And it's just my favorite novella. In some ways, yes, because it's like a secret that I have that other people don't have. Most people don't look at this novella as good a quality as I look at it as having. But it's just an excellent story that has anything I could want from a novella. And if you get anything from this video, if you haven't read The Breathing Method, read The Breathing Method. So that was 41 novellas. My voice is a little shot. Don't know how long this video is going to last, but it's over an hour now. So let that whet your appetite for when I do complete ranking of all Stephen King's books, in which I am going to give more opinions that'll probably make you go, no, you're wrong. You're insane. So please like and subscribe. Let me know what your favorite novellas of King's are. Is there somebody out there whose favorite novella is A Face in the Crowd? So until next time.